Hi, my name is Tarush, and in this video I actually wanted to show you how technology at any company, be it a small startup or even a big company such as Google or Facebook, works. And I want to achieve this by actually going over a problem statement and seeing how technological decisions are made. So, a little introduction about me. I'm a computer science graduate and I'm currently working at a startup in Bangalore. So, let's say the first problem statement that gets thrown at you is that of building a welcome page for your users. So, all that means is a website where we have the user's name that has logged in and we can see a welcome message for that particular user. Um, so before we get right into coding and the terminal and the editor and stuff like that, at any company or an organization or even as a freelancer, the first decisions that usually, in my opinion, make a lot of sense is the system architecture. Now, it sounds like a fancy word and it's system architecture. What's that? It's pretty simple. All it means is deciding what goes where and how we are going to communicate between our user-facing services, such as basically the website, or our business logic, or the backend in this case. Okay, so let's get into the development of this project. Very simple, very straightforward. Let's create a folder. I've named my folder Welcome Page Project. In here, we're just going to go into this folder. Now in here, whatever text editor you're using, just open this folder with that text editor. I've done so, and here's mine in Sublime. Cool. So if you can see, I have created two files under this folder on the left over here. One is called index.html and one is called index.py. Cool. First, the index.html. Very simple. It's absolutely nothing. Just an HTML file where let's say any title welcome and let's say welcome user over here. Now, this is going to serve us something called as a static page. That means it's not going to re-render based on the basis of any of our business logic or the backend. It's just going to serve. Let me just open it right here. This. That's all. Welcome to the page user. Now this is not going to change over time. This does not depend who's going to open it, and this is not the purpose of our application. The purpose of our application is getting something from the backend, or depending on who has opened the page, we can see welcome to the page and that user's name. Cool. So now to go ahead with this, we're going to use something called Flask. Flask is pretty straightforward. It's a minimalistic backend service built on Python. Okay. To install Flask, you first need to install something called pip, which is pretty simple. There's this file called getpip.py, which I have over here. All you need to run is python getpip.py. I'll leave the link for this as well in the description, and also a simple guide on how to do so. Cool. Once you've installed pip, the next step is to install Flask. So all you need to do is pip3 install Flask, and you should have Flask ready and up and running. Okay, now that we have Flask installed, there's another thing that we need to install, which is called Flask cores, which is just a simple Python command, pip install, as you can see over here. Now, this is required so that our front end, which we've written in HTML, can interact with that Flask script that we're going to write in our Python code. Cool. So, a small thing that I don't know if it's beneficial or not, but whenever I am trying to learn a new technology or a new framework, like what Flask is, I would go onto the quick start website, quick start guide. Usually almost every framework, mainstream framework, has this. And if you go over here, they show you how a minimal application can be made from their code. So if I just copy this and I head over to our code, if you remember our index.html file. Oh, I've also added one more thing in here, which is called jQuery. So like Flask is for Python, where it's a package made for developers to, as an ease of life. jQuery is also something that can be used in conjunction with JavaScript in our front end, and we'll get back to this. So for the first thing is our index.py file. Let me just copy this, and this doesn't matter. Okay, so this is what they've instructed for us to do. And if you actually see what they've written, they've just said you need to run explode flask app and name of your file. So so we have export flask app index.py because index.py is our file name, and then let's hit flask run. Now if you see, our server is up and running on this IP address, and if you open it on your browser, you'll be able to see what it returns. I think I did not save that file. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I just had a different instance of it running, and now if we just correlate our file, in our file you can see that for the route slash we want to return hello world. So this is the IP address of our backend, our Flask application, and root slash, that means a slash over here, and I click enter, it's going to return hello world. Now again you change this to whatever you want, ASC, whatever, and just rerun the application and you'll see that it changes like however you want it to. Okay, so the basic difference between what we are serving over here and what we are serving through our HTML file is the data that you see coming in over here is actually coming to us in not in a formatted way currently. So for example, in HTML you could add different tags, you can have CSS, you can have animations going on, whereas the backend, this is just plain text that is being received at the moment. I mean, of course you can do a lot of other things with Flask, but at the moment it is just plain text. Whereas our HTML file, we could do a lot of things. For example, if I just head over to the HTML file, I can just say h1. For those of you who are still new to all of this, h1 just means heading. So, and you see that it changes. But if we do the same thing with a Python file, so if I add h1 here, that's not going to do anything because that's just going to come, it's just going to get ignored. Okay. So why do we need our backend? So let me show you this. That came out so wrong, but okay. Let me show you this. From datetime, again for all the newbies, datetime is just a simple library that lets us get the current date and time. So all I need to do is datetime.now. It's like I said, it's almost like reading English. And this comes pre-installed with Python, so you don't need to install it using pip or anything. Cool. Once you make any change to your file, always remember to just rerun your server. And you can see that every time I refresh, that current date and time is coming in. Now, something like this is not possible using only HTML because we want some logic for this to be rendered. Now, of course, you can do this using something called JavaScript, but let's just let that be for now. Okay, so now I want the logged in user's name to come in. In case of simplicity, what we can do is, for now, since we don't want to, have usernames and passwords and a database to hold all of this, let's just say whatever user is logged in right now, his name is John. Okay, so John. Hi John. Alright, and once we do that, we now want to show this name to the front end. So this is where we are connecting our HTML file to our Python file, which means we're connecting our HTML static website to our dynamic backend. Okay, so if you go over here, this is our HTML file. One change is this jQuery thing that I mentioned earlier, and all we do is, okay, we're going to do something called a GET request. Now, there are, if I'm not mistaken, 5 types of requests, which is GET, POST, DELETE, PUT, and one more which I'm missing out on, but currently not important in this context. So a GET request does as it says, it's going to get certain information from a URL that we specify. Now, if you remember, our development server, our terminal, told us that our development server is running on this IP address, right? So you could just go over to your HTML file and say get on this. All right. Now, whenever your HTML file needs to interact with your Python file, right? That means your front end needs to interact with your backend. It cannot happen synchronously. What that means is, as soon as you send a request, you're not going to get a response right then. For example, if I was to say let x is equal to 5, that just means that we've assigned a data of 5 to a variable called x. Okay, now this happens synchronously. That means it happens almost immediately. We don't have to wait for this operation to succeed because it's a guaranteed success. Whereas a get on this URL will take time. Now, of course, in our case, it'll take less than 5 milliseconds, which we won't be able to notice, but it makes a huge deal for JavaScript, which is what we're using here to communicate. Okay, so to make sure that it happens synchronously and to make sure that, our requests were successful, we use .then. Okay, so this entire statement over here, dollar, is actually jQuery. jQuery is the module that we'd gotten earlier. jQuery provides us with a function called get, which is a get request to this URL that I have over here. So we do $.get on this URL, and fun fact, your browser is also doing a get. So that means if you go to google.com, you're actually doing a get request to google.com. And my internet's not working, but yeah, the gist is that you're actually doing a get request to google.com. Okay, yeah, my internet's back. Okay, so yes, now coming back here, so we have .then. So like I had done earlier, which was let x equal to 5. I want this data to come to me, right? So I'm going to call it data, and now I'm just going to log this data. Okay, for now you don't need to get into deep about what that arrow means and how it has come into picture, but this basically it can be treated as that this data that this data that we got by making this request is now visible to us for all the statements after the arrow. Okay, so I'm just going to log this data, but if you notice, this command is going to fail. And if you just go here and let me go down, yeah. So on your website, you can open your console, which you just do by right click and inspect, and on any Chrome browser, and you go to console, and you can see that it has been blocked by cross origin requests. So that just means that we've installed this earlier, if you remember, and we just import from here, and we do cors is equal to cors for our app. Alright, cool, and we rerun our server. So any change to our backend file, we rerun the server, and now if you notice, we've received that data. Console.log just logs it in this console area for your website. Okay, so this is actually a huge deal right now, because our front end, without us touching anything in the backend, has started making calls to the backend, to the Python file. Now let's see how we can change our front end on the basis of the backend. Alright, so now that we've connected our backend to the front end, what we would now want to start showing this data on our HTML file. Now how you do that is, there's actually a function in JavaScript which is called document.getElement by ID. So what that means is, for any tag in your HTML file which has a particular ID, we can access that tag. So I'll just put it in simpler terms. If I have a div is division, it's just a simple tag that we can use in HTML. Let's give it an ID of test. Alright, and within this div, we don't need to put any data. So let's say it's blank right now. Now we get this element test. Now document.get element by id now has gotten me this element, and all I'll do is dot inner html. What that means is we're basically accessing its content, and we're gonna set it to whatever we want. Let's say video recording. Cool. And let's refresh our page. So now if you see, we actually within our HTML content, we didn't put any text into test, but using our script tag or our JavaScript in our HTML file, we changed the content. Now we're going to use a similar thing. So if you remember, our data is what has come to us from the backend, which is hi John, and we're going to set the data for test to be what we get from the backend. So we do this and we set it to data. Alright, and let me just make it look a little pretty. Cool. So hi John is what we've gotten from the backend. Now if I change it to hi John, the time is another function that we'd already used, datetime.now, and you just need to make it a string because it comes as something else, which I'm not sure. And restart a server and refresh. So if you remember, our backend earlier, whenever we refresh, used to change your time. Now every time we refresh our front end as well, it's going to change your time because it's the backend that is sending its data. Okay. Now to show you, if you followed along to here, props to you. And to show you how much of a big deal this is, google.com, once you type in ASD, is doing exactly what you just did. That means it's sending a GET request to its backend with the query of ASD, and it's going to wait for the response, and whatever the response it gets, it's going to show you over here. Probably not the right search to do, but yeah, you get the gist of what I'm saying. So if this was google.com, you have literally just created a simple google.com where you've sent a query of nothing in this case, and you've gotten a response, and you've shown that response to your user. So congratulations on making your first web application. And if you've reached so far, I would love to hear from you if there's anything that I can improve on, or if I can change, or if we can continue and make this into a series where we have authentication come in, and we keep building on this application to maybe actually make it into what a startup's application would look like at some point. And yeah, if you liked what you saw, please drop a like, and thank you.